Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm speaking. So I would like to present the next presenter. And before I do that, I would like to really give a big thanks to Excel Energy for sponsoring our next presenter for being in here. So anyway, the next presenter is our one and only Ramshankar. And the title of the research is Optimizing Competitiveness in Congressional Districts in order to mitigate the effect of gerrymandering. Here's Ramshankar.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Ramshankar Balasubramaniyan, or just Ram for convenience. Today, I'll be talking with you about optimizing competitiveness in United States congressional districts in order to hopefully reduce the effects of gerrymandering. Let's get started. What is gerrymandering? Now, the United States House of Representatives has 435 seats, meaning that there are 435 congressional districts distributed among the 50 states. The number of congressional districts allocated to each state is dependent on that state's population. So if the state has a higher population, then there will be more districts allocated to that state and therefore more seats for that state in the House of Representatives. Now, the framers realized that population shifts were inevitably going to occur among the states, so they included a mechanism to account for this in the United States Constitution. Basically, the Constitution, every 10 years, requires the U.S. government to count the number of people inside each of the United States and record that data in something called a census. Using census data, a process called political redistricting occurs. And political redistricting is when congressional districts are redrawn in the 50 states in order to compensate for an increase or a decrease in population. Where gerrymandering comes into play in all of this is when the state legislature, which is responsible for the political redistricting process, draws congressional districts in a way to numerically advantage a certain political party. And this is done through packing and cracking. Packing is when members of a given political party are crammed into one district. And cracking is when they're spread thin among many districts. And packing and cracking combined can dilute the voices of voters of a given political party. And this is exemplified in the diagrams contained on the slide. As you can see here, there are equal numbers of voters from Party X and voters from Party O, but by packing voters from Party X into one district, and then cracking the remainder of the voters into 3 separate districts, voters of Party O are able to secure a majority in 3 of the 4 districts and thereby win the state. Something similar is depicted in the diagram to your left, except that now 60% of the state population is of the blue party and 40% is of the red party. But still, by packing voters of the blue party into 2 congressional districts and then cracking the remainder of the voters across 3 separate districts, voters of Party O are able to secure an advantage in 3 of the 5 districts and again win the state. So, at this point, you're probably asking yourself, is this process legal? And the answer to that question is actually yes. The courts have yet to make an explicit ruling on the constitutionality of the practice of political gerrymandering, but there have been some court decisions that have limited the practice to an extent. For instance, the case of Shaw v. Reno has deemed it unconstitutional to gerrymander on the basis of race. But again, because there was no explicit court ruling on the practice of political gerrymandering, it has still been allowed to continue. Now, the effects of gerrymandering are quite profound because gerrymandering essentially creates a situation where representatives are able to choose their voters rather than voters being able to choose their representatives. After the 2010 census, Republicans were able to use gerrymandering to gain control of the House by a 234 to 201 margin, even though Democrats received 1.4 more million votes during that election cycle. Gerrymandering is also particularly harmful because it creates what are known as safe districts. And safe districts are districts where the winning candidate wins by a margin of 55% or more. And this is problematic for 2 reasons. First of all, it increases voter cynicism. Because if I'm a voter who lives in a safe district and I know that one candidate is guaranteed to win, that's going to disengage me from the political process and keep me from actually going and casting my ballot because I know that I've already predetermined that a certain candidate is going to win. The second reason safe districts are problematic is because they cause party polarization. If I'm a candidate running from a safe district, then I know that I'm guaranteed a House congressional seat, then that's going to cause me to sequester myself onto one side of the political spectrum and refuse to compromise on political issues because I'm guaranteed a spot on the House of Representatives. Previous research has been conducted on the topic of political gerrymandering, and in particular, two computer-generated algorithms have gained notoriety in the political science community as potential alternatives to allowing the state legislature to engage in the political redistricting process. The first of these two computer-generated algorithms is called the shortest split line algorithm, which was developed by the Center of Range Voting in 2005. And how this algorithm works is it creates equally populated districts by drawing the shortest line that would make that population distribution possible. And that's displayed in the top image, where the first division creates two equally populated districts, and the subsequent divisions create 4 and 8 equally populated districts, respectively. The next computer-generated algorithm is known as Olson's method, which was developed by Brian Olson in 2010. And Olson's method works through what are known as Bohr-line diagrams. And Bohr-line diagrams function through distributing generating points called feeds across the state. And the number of feeds for each state is dependent on the number of congressional districts that state has. And then from each of the feeds, the polygons grow out and keep growing until they come into contact with another polygon, at which point they stop growing. And the image, this image right here is an image of Texas's redistricting scheme underneath Olson's method, and the image directly above that is of Texas underneath the shortest split line algorithm. Now, despite their popularity in the political science community, both of these algorithms have their significant shortcomings. For one, they place more emphasis on compactness rather than competitiveness, meaning that they can produce very compact districts that aren't competitive at all and therefore wouldn't mitigate the effects produced by safe districts and cynicism and party polarization. Another significant shortcoming to these two computer-generated algorithms is the fact that they don't take community organizational structures into account, meaning that if they're actually implemented in reality, they can end up dividing cities and breaking up towns. So, my product outline. A big flaw I noticed with the previous research done on political gerrymandering is the fact that it tries to take away politics from a situation that's inherently political. James Madison wrote in Federalist 10 that factions, which are essentially the term they used to call political parties in the late 1900s, can't be eliminated, but their effects can be controlled. And that's something I try to keep in mind as I was going throughout my presentation. Another thing I tried to keep in mind as I was going through my research was to not go beyond county organizational structure as I was devising my redistricting scheme. Because by maintaining county organizational structure, I could preserve traditional county responsibilities, such as law enforcement and public transportation. So the main postulate that ran through my head as I was going through my research was to optimize competition as much as possible. Because the main way to stop safe districts and cynicism and party polarization is to create as many marginal districts, or districts where the winning candidate wins within 55% of the vote as possible. And the main way I optimize competition is through statistical techniques of stratified sampling, where I placed similar amounts of major party voters in the congressional districts that I created. And the simplified model, what I was able to do is displayed here, where there are equal amounts of voters from party X and voters from party O in the 4 districts displayed. So, before I could acquire my data, I had to choose which state I was actually going to develop a redistricting scheme for. And I decided to go with the state of Colorado because we live in Colorado, or at least most of us live in Colorado, and Arizona because Arizona is special in that it uses an independent redistricting commission rather than its state legislature to engage in the political redistricting process. So I wanted to test my scheme out against a scheme produced by an independent commission. So I was able to acquire all of the data that I needed from the voter registration data available on the state secretary website for the particular states that I was looking at. And the website I pulled the data for Colorado is right there, and then right below it is where I got my data for Arizona. And on these websites, there will be tables very similar to the table displayed on the slide, where they would have all of the counties counties of the state, and then that state's number, or that county's number of Democrats and Republicans for each of the counties. So once I finished acquiring my data, it was time for me to sort it onto Excel. And I went about this process by creating a county list of voters by party. So by the end of the process, I had two lists, one for each state, one county list of, or one state list of counties and that county's respective number of Democrats in ascending order, and then counties and those counties' respective number of Republicans in ascending order. And again, I had these ascending lists for both the states of Colorado and Arizona. Using those lists, I was actually able to create my congressional districts by picking and choosing different counties and then using the AutoSum function on Excel to ensure that the counties that I was picking had relatively equal amounts of Democrats and Republicans. And one final thing I had to keep in mind as I was going through the district creation process was to maintain relative contiguity. Because I can't just haphazardly pick counties from one side of the state and other side of the state, because if my scheme was actually going to be implemented in reality, that would just generate mass confusion. So I had to keep an eye on the county map for both Colorado and Arizona as I was going through the district creation process in order to ensure that I was maintaining relative continuity. And a completed result of what I produced is shown on the slide, where this is the 8th congressional district I produced for Arizona, and as you can see, I have 3 counties in this district and relatively equal amounts of Democrats and Republicans in the district. So this is one of the marginal districts I created for Arizona in hopes of mitigating the effect of gerrymandering by occupying competition. And then once I finished the district creation process for both Colorado and Arizona, I was able to calculate competitiveness index scores for all the districts that I've chosen. And I basically calculated this competitiveness index score by dividing the number of Republicans and Democrats in each district, and then calculating that percentage difference. So in this case, a lower percentage difference actually means that the district is more competitive, because that lower percentage difference signifies that there are more equal amounts of major party voters in the district, and therefore more competition is likely to ensue in that district. So once I finished acquiring, sorting, and creating my congressional districts on Excel, it was time for me to actually build my maps. And I used open source software called Quantum GIS to build my maps. GIS software is special in that it uses shapefiles in order to represent visual information. Basically, if you load a shapefile onto the layer panel of any GIS software, that shapefile will be translated into visual information that you can view on the view and map. Now, there was no special shapefile for the specific images that I needed. I needed a county map for Colorado and a county map for Arizona, but no shapefile like that existed. So I had to be a little creative and use a geoprocessing tool available on QGIS called the CLIP algorithm in order to generate the necessary shapefiles. And what the CLIP algorithm basically allowed me to do was section out specific parts of the entire U.S. county shapefile, specifically the states of Colorado and Arizona, in order to later modify to my will. And then once I generated the shapefiles I needed, I was able to open the attribute table for those shapefiles, and then based on the data that I had categorized on Excel, I was able to color code each of the counties on the shapefile in order to correlate to what the particular congressional district as I had it listed on Excel. And then attribute table would open something very similar to the image shown on the slide. And the attribute table would essentially have all the counties of the particular state I was looking at, so I could choose the color of that state as I please. And then some challenges that I ran into as I was building my maps. It was hard for me to preserve both complete contiguity and optimal compactness because human geography doesn't allow me to do so. And you'll see that as I go through my results in the next 2 slides. So, results for Colorado. In terms of competitiveness, non-read district scored about a 16.4% versus about a 64% for the current Colorado congressional districts. And again, this smaller percentage difference signifies that my districts are actually more competitive than the districts that exist in the status quo, because that smaller percentage difference means that there's more, on average, there's more equal amounts of Democrats and Republicans in my districts, and therefore more competition is more likely to ensue in the districts that I created. And over here, you can see that I have the gray one skew with the central pink district as well as the line district. Now, once I was completed with the process of obtaining competitive index results in Colorado, I had to take Arizona one step further. And I ran some spatial analysis tests on Arizona with the help of a field calculator, which is yet another tool available on GIS. And the field calculator would pull up a window very similar to this one. And if you look at the middle column, there's various field calculations that you can make. But I required values for the areas and perimeters of the specific redesign districts that I was looking at. So I went down to geometry and then hit area and perimeter for each of my congressional districts. And then once I got those area and perimeter values, I was able to find the compactness scores of those redesigned districts through the use of the Paulson-Popper test. And the Paulson-Popper test is the main compactness test for congressional districts. Once I obtained all of the compactness scores for my redesigned Arizona districts, as well as all the competitive scores, I was able to go onto the ARSC's website and pull competitiveness and compactness scores for their districts in order to later compare them to my results. So, results for Arizona. In terms of compactness, my redesigned district scored about a 0.4 on the Paulson-Popper scale versus the ARC, which scored about a 0.3 on the Paulson-Popper scale. And this means that my districts are more compact than the districts produced by the Independent Commission, because the scale ranges from 0, meaning no compactness, to 1, meaning complete compactness. So my redesigned districts fared better on the scale. And then in terms of competitiveness, my redesigned district scored about a 12% versus the ARC, which scored about a 17.6%. Again, this lower percentage difference signifies that my districts are more competitive because on average there are more equal amounts of Major Party voters in my districts compared to the districts produced by the ARC. And then in terms of continuity, again, I have a great continuity with this pink district as well as with this top east district. So towards the conclusion of my research experiment, I started realizing the importance of district competition in combating the effects of gerrymandering and state districts. In terms of stopping party polarization, marginal districts are very useful because the candidate is forced to appeal to the broader middle as opposed to the side when he or she is running from a marginal district, because that would increase that candidate's chances of actually being elected. And then in terms of cynicism, voter cynicism is more likely to decrease in a marginal district when compared to a state district, because only a few votes can have an impact on who actually gets elected in the marginal district. Meaning a voter will be re-engaged in the political process and actually go outside and cast their ballots in a competitive district. And then as a possible future study, we could use a different organizational structure. I use county in my redesign teams, but we could go down to the precinct level, which is what is displayed in this shapefile over here, in order to generate our congressional districts. And then the future of gerrymandering. There's actually a Supreme Court case going on right now in Wisconsin called Whitford v. Gill that will likely finally make a decision as to the constitutionality of the practice of political gerrymandering. So keep an eye out for that case. And then in terms of independent redistricting commissions. Independent redistricting commissions are actually gaining a lot of popularity in the present right now, and before the 2020 census, it's likely that citizens' initiatives will supplant state legislatures as the main vehicle for the congressional redistricting process with independent redistricting commissions. Here are the references that I used for my presentation. And before I end, I would like to make a few acknowledgments. I'd like to thank Mustafa, my mentor, for helping me throughout my research. I'd like to thank Anita, my advisor, for correcting my papers and helping me through the practice presentation. I'd like to thank Lori, the FSI director, as well as the FSI staff for all of their help throughout the completion of my research. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Excel Energy for being my research and program sponsor and allowing me to engage in the extremely fun and rewarding activities here at FSI. I'm now open to questions.
So at the start, we spoke about the frameworks.
The frameworks were composed of various political parties. Those included the Democratic Republicans as well as the Federalists, and they all gathered together in Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention and devised the Constitution and included the 10-year census requirement in that process. Yes.
So was the data that you created your web based on it? Was that something that you found that as the districts were responsible for in terms of the new data?
The question asked was the data that I used to create my redistricting scheme available from the 2010 census, or was it newer data? And the answer to that is it's newer data. It's completely updated data that was available on the Secretary of State website. Yes.
Do you have any suggestions on how this can be done on a large scale in the whole country?
I think that the best way to go about this process is not use a computer to generate the schemes. I think it's going to require a mixture of both computers and humans to create a scheme that's beneficial for everybody. But in terms of larger scale, I think independent redistricting commissions are an extremely viable option, especially because, as you saw, the competitiveness of the districts that they produced were actually very close to mine. Yeah. Well, the question was what limitations did I see in my model, and the biggest limitation that I saw was the fact that it wasn't completely contiguous. And because of that, it's probably unlikely that it would actually be implemented in reality. But there are ways to solve for that that may involve sacrificing some competition. Yes?
Fair presentation. Question for you. As a district is more competitive, we see more spending.
I'm sorry, what?
As a district is more competitive, do we see more spending from the political parties?
I think the question asked was, if districts are more competitive, will there be more spending? I think the answer to that is yes, because logically, if candidates are running against each other and the election is very close, they'll be putting out more money for advertisements, more money out for campaigning in order to actually ensure that they're getting elected. Yes.
Part two, as we're seeing more and more spending in our political sector, do you see the removal of gerrymandering as facilitating more spending, more divisive or more polarized spending, and actually get value?
The part two of that question was, would increased spending caused by the removal of gerrymandering actually divide the country more? And I think that the most sophisticated answer to that would be that political spending is its own beast, and depending on the sources of where that funding is coming from, that's going to have a greater impact on whether our country will be divided or united. Yes?
Were you able to create more compact districts in Colorado as well as more competitive ones?
I actually didn't run a spatial analysis for Colorado because after I finished the clipping layer disappeared. So, yeah.
Is gerrymandering also a problem in other countries? And just how do we deal with it?
Gerrymandering, the question asked was, is gerrymandering a problem in all countries or just the United States? And I would say that gerrymandering is only a problem in the United States because it's pretty much exclusive to congressional districts.
So how do, is it possible to take the way other countries, I don't know about other countries, how they choose their representatives, so would it be possible to use some of those tools to make more competitive in their districts in the United States? Or
I think it's a little too late to change our political process right now, but in order to, most of the ways we devise our political schemes were borrowed from other countries, particularly Britain. So I don't think that we could remodel our political process right now in order to make competition different, but we could use my scheme.